Earth Elder Myra L. Jackson has held a diverse array of hefty careers in engineering, holographic organizational development, and academia. While those experiences might seem divergent from her deep mystical roots, she found that her early training in electrical theory, physics, and music informed her inner and outer life. Today, that training provides useful metaphorical language in discussing the physics of now that points to our intrinsic bond with nature. Today, Myra carries the title of Diplomat of the Biosphere with a primary focus on transforming our societal relationship with nature through public policy approaches that recognize nature's intrinsic rights to exist whole along with her life forms. In listening to the earth, Myra strives to fully realize the aspirational premise of the luminous thread she carries. This is the big missing aspect for a lot of people. And what we're talking about is how humans are an aspect of nature and how it informs us and our actions day to day and our work in the world. So I'd love to start to just reference, because I believe most people aren't working from that reference, not in our industrialized society, of how we are nature. Like, how did you remember? I feel like most of us forget.
Mm. Well, you know how they say that's a really good question.
Yeah.
And it really is the question
Yeah.
because before I was cognitively aware, I realized the things that stood out in my life as touchstones were already a conveyance that was ensuring that I would remember this connection. And so, first, I would have to say that I never lost it and that I had the great fortune of having a grandmother who ignited it in such a lived way, meaning it was grounded. It was who and what she was, and you could see her connection to the earth had information that most people could not provide. I mean, I didn't have another person that's such a reference for being able to read and know herself in a comfortable way in nature. And the way that played out was when I was very young, my grandmother came and visited us in San Diego from Michigan. And we were walking around the canyons around our house. And things I saw every day looked very different when I was walking and hearing my grandmother narrate what she was seeing. And it opened my eyes. It took me on a journey that has never ended. And I'll give you an example. We had canyons surrounding us. We were on a hill. And yet, in walking with my grandmother, she said, this whole land was underwater. I said, Grandmother, how do you know that? Here, the ocean's way over there. We can see it. And she said, Dot, which she would call all of us who were the women in the family, Dot, look down. And I looked down, not expecting to see any evidence of this being underwater. And what did I find? She said, just rub your hand on the soil. And there were seashells all over the hill. So this would go on and play out in many ways. She would know when the weather was coming, and she often used her tongue to give information about when we would see rain on a full sunny day. And San Diego, you have 72 degrees of weather, usually day in, day out, although that is changing with climate. And so I just learned so much by the way that she walked in the world. And I was really fortunate later in my life, because by this time I was around 6 years old. And I couldn't wait to have her again, because by that time I figured out what my questions were. But I was reading everything. I knew that these bodies that we had could have access to information that wasn't visible to us. So if you
Beautiful.
want to know the beginning of feeling connection to nature, it was through being with my grandmother and her lived experience, her narration of what she was seeing as we walked in nature.
Beautiful. And that level of true foundation, I would think that would set you up pretty well for having a balanced perspective moving into the world. I'm not sure, but I would love to hear how it informed your next steps in walking into the world.
I think this is what threw me into a fascination with not only the earth, but also the sky above. And I became very interested in science, what I could observe, what I could smell, what I could see. And that idea of observation was huge. I became a young astronomer. So not only was I watching our planetary being as a living being and my body, part of a larger body that is Earth, and Earth, a part of a larger body that's a part of a solar system and a galaxy, but that there were many galaxies. So when I was looking at the macro, something within me was tracking the micro. And I found there was correspondence to the inner world and the outer world. And that there's a complexity. It cannot be dribbled down into simple ideas or anything that's static.
Mhm.
And our environments indoor are static. We try to control temperature and the aesthetic, and we mow and shape our lawns in certain ways. And we lose touch with the dynamism and the complexity all around us. We lose the ability to live with complexity and to understand that we at the smallest levels are a part of something greater than ourselves. And anytime we refer to myself, what's happening with myself is about how much access do I have to the living intelligence of the planetary being and the greater cosmos.
That is very powerful. I find that when we talk, we like to go in a direction. Our minds were trained that way. We like to go in the direction of one or the other. We want to choose the right direction. And it does, it keeps you from understanding in a more complex way. I find that it also increases our ability to be fearful around things of the unknown and the unwillingness to take risk as well, to see what happens is what I call it. Like you let's just
Yeah.
see what happens. And I'm wanting some of that, what you've been working on, helping people understand the rights of nature. Talk a little bit about how understanding that there are innate rights helps us to orient ourselves in a way that creates more holistic things, projects, solutions, this kind of thing.
Yes. There's a few things that you, in your preamble to the question that you spoke of, that are important, and I want to highlight it because you talked about an awareness of our being preconditioned. And you're right, we are human beings living outside of informal education that used to be well honed in nature, well honed in our recognition that we were a part of nature. And language itself, which contains ideas of our conditioning has an absence of words and concepts that describe and depict and honor the sacred bonds between human beings and all other sentient beings, all the other intelligences.